Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the co-hosts of Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast where we walk listeners through the ins, the outs, and the retcons of our favorite superhero soap opera.
We are also the co-hosts of Rachel and Miles Review the X-Men.
Which is what you're watching right now.
Where we talk about all the X-Men books that come out each week. Now, this week we actually have 2 weeks worth of books from October 8th and October 15th.
Because we were at New York Comic Con, which meant we didn't have a chance to review the ones that came out last week.
And in the meantime, Marvel decided to put a bunch of books out from 2 giant events.
So we're doing something a little different this week. We're going to review them instead of chronologically putting each week in a batch. We're going to look at them by event, because everything with 2 issues is part of either The Death of Wolverine or Axis.
So, to start off, I guess let's just go with what Marvel's focusing at least all of its marketing money on, which is Axis. Rachel?
So, Axis is a weekly title, and we're 2 issues in, but they flow together so directly that I'm just going to look at both of them at once. I'm enjoying Axis. It's not objectively that good. It's a contrived crossover event. It's about a bunch of superheroes teaming up to fight a bad guy, in this case the Red Skull, who is also currently Onslaught, so that's a thing. But what Axis and AVX in concert taught me is that I am way more into contrived camaraderie than I am into contrived enmity, and as a big superhero team-up fight series, it's fun.
Yeah, that said, I mean, this is actually very similar to Avengers vs. X-Men, I agree. But one of the things it also has in common is that it's a big, explodey, punchy summer crossover. It kind of reminds me of, like, the Marvel equivalent of a Michael Bay movie. If you're looking for subtlety, if you're looking for nuanced character development, you should probably look elsewhere. If you're looking for a bunch of superheroes to be snarky and punch the hell out of a big red guy, well, then hey, this book's your ticket.
It does actually have some pretty good character development moments. We were talking earlier about how this is kind of turning into the month of Cyclops, and this is the series that brings together the Avengers Unity team and the X-Men, you know, in addition to the Avengers and every single other character in the Marvel Universe. And that intersection is actually played really well.
What the books really focus on so far, though, are Magneto to a degree, and Rick Remender does write a damn good Magneto, like we've been saying in Uncanny Avengers, but largely Iron Man. Really, this is almost autobiographical, with Iron Man sort of self-loathing and where he's going with that, which is, well, if you like Iron Man, interesting. If you're strictly an X-Men fan, this one's a little less relevant.
Yeah, if you've got the disposable income, you like big team-up melees, snarkiness, you know, superheroes making friends again after fighting each other for the last 3 years, go for it. If not, it's not essential.
All right, now the Axis tie-in we have this week, at least on the X-Men side of things, is Magneto number 11, which is by Cullen Bunn with art by Gabriel Hernandez Walta.
And it ties in very directly. It actually takes place directly between Axis 1 and Axis 2.
Well, or more specifically, a certain scene in Axis number 2. It's basically about Magneto getting in the big fight that's taking place in Axis number 1 and 2, ditching the fight to be kind of self-doubting and depressed for a while with the woman he's been working with previous to this crossover, and then going and gathering a whole bunch of villains to come back for the big reveal at the end of Axis number 2. This issue does suffer from what a lot of issues can suffer from in the middle of crossovers, which is that really the only stuff that's going on is what's relevant to the crossover. That said, we do get some pretty good Magneto sort of internal monologue, talking about the doubts he has about whether his darkness has been a good thing or a bad thing for the mark he's left on the world, and that at least was kind of cool.
The other big event, and the one that's really dominating X-Books this month, is, of course, The Death of Wolverine.
Yeah, so this week we have Death of Wolverine number 4, which is the end of the miniseries, and the one that makes the title accurate. Wolverine does, in fact, die.
Finally.
For at least the next 10 minutes.
Although he totally has the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing going on, where in death he actually has more ongoing titles than he did in life.
It's seriously getting kind of ridiculous. But as for the book itself, so this, like the other issues, is by Charles Soule and Steve McNiven. And we've mentioned that the Death of Wolverine so far has been kind of a greatest hits for the character. We've seen Japan, we've seen Madripoor. This time we see the Weapon X facility where it all started, and that is in fact where Wolverine finally does get killed. Now, I've had mixed feelings about this series. It's had some good moments, it's had some bad moments.
I think with all of the build-up to this moment, to the actual death of Wolverine, there's not a lot they could have done that wouldn't have been anticlimactic, and yeah, it kind of is.
In fact, it really is. Now, on the one hand, while I did want some big, like, Wolverine dies to save the entire time stream and space stream, you know, at the same time, you could make an argument for something smaller and more personal and intimate being more appropriate, but this feels almost, without giving anything away, it just doesn't feel as significant as I would like it to feel. We do get some good emotional beats as Wolverine kind of talks to his nemesis in this issue about, whether his life has been good or bad, kind of like Magneto in that last issue we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think it could be good overall for the storyline of the X books. The issue was sadly a little bit lackluster.
There are going to be a number of series spinning out of Wolverine's death, and the first of those is the Logan Legacy, written by Charles Soule, drawn by Oliver Nome. And it's okay. It reminds me a little bit of The Usual Suspects or the Batman the Animated Series episode Almost Got Him, in that it's a group of characters, mostly villains in X-23, associated closely with Wolverine, gathered in one place, and they're each going to be telling a different story or a story from a different perspective.
And the book actually has kind of a ballsy move with what it does there. Now, I normally love editor's notes, like, see the now classic issue number whatever. But this one is actually referencing future issues. And in a way, it's kind of cool. In a way, it seems like a tacky advertisement for other issues in the rest of the series and an excuse to not have anything actually happen in this one.
Yeah, I find that particular conceit obnoxious as hell. I see what they're going for, but I don't like it.
That said, the artist for this book does draw a mean Sabretooth, and I gotta respect the book for that at least.
But a super weird Charles Xavier.
Super weird. Very true.
I mean, I think it's a series that has the potential to be good. I'm really not sold on it with this issue.
I think Marvel's going to make a lot of money because it has the word Logan on the cover, and I think that's probably the main reason they're doing it.
Yeah, I think event fatigue is definitely influencing my opinion here, but again, unless you're really, really into following all of the Death of Logan stuff, I'd give this one a miss.
So we also have a number of issues which are sort of spinning off Death of Wolverine in the sense that it's unrelated titles where the characters are reacting to the death of Wolverine.
Well, unrelated except in that they're X books, and so fundamentally tied
yeah.
in.
So the first of those is Nightcrawler number 7. This is by Chris Claremont with art by Todd Nauck. This has been a really hit-and-miss series so far. Chris Claremont was extremely strong, stellar in the 70s and 80s, and since then he's been, I think, a little mixed quality-wise. This book's definitely been an example of that. This issue is a little bit stronger than ones we've seen, I think mainly because there's just so much ore to mine from the friendship of Nightcrawler and Wolverine. And so we see, it's actually very reminiscent of the first issue of Uncanny X-Men after Phoenix died in the Dark Phoenix saga.
That would be 138.
Yeah, where Cyclops is sort of going over the history of the X-Men from the very beginning. This is Nightcrawler going over the history of his friendship with Wolverine, and as such, it's got a really good nostalgic vibe that I think Claremont's very suited to write, I find myself getting a little choked up.
Yeah, it's a really solid elegy to Wolverine from Nightcrawler's perspective. We've talked on the podcast before about really loving that particular friendship. Mm-hmm. And I think this issue really does do it justice. Honestly, I think it's the best issue of Nightcrawler so far.
I might agree with that, yeah. Now, it's not without the same flaws every other issue of the series has had, but it's decently solid, and for an event that could certainly be seen as a gimmick, I think it does pretty well.
Yeah, it's got a lot of heart. Now, another issue that operates from a very, very similar premise is Wolverine and the X-Men number 10. This is still written by Jason Latour, but it's drawn by a huge lineup of artists.
Like a lot.
Yeah, and it's basically a montage as a writer goes around, who's writing a definitive biography of Wolverine, goes around and interviews students and faculty at the Jean Grey School, and then each one of the anecdotes is in a different style. And I think that as far as, milking character death goes, this issue is really good.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about it, with all the different artists that are involved, is I'd say one of the things to really talk about Wolverine, if you're talking about him after he died, like Speaker for the Dead style, is that he was a lot of different people. He was a very nuanced character with a lot of different sides to himself. Having the art switch every time we have a different character talk about a different part of Wolverine, I really like the symbolism of that, in addition to just enjoying seeing all these different takes on all the Jean Grey School students.
I like your use of the word nuanced as opposed to inconsistently written. I think he's both. And yeah, this issue does a good job of grounding Wolverine's death in the things that made him matter as a character during his life.
Now, we did recently learn that this series is actually on its way out. It's going to be replaced by Spider-Man and the X-Men, where Spider-Man's a guidance counselor for the kids, which sounds awesome.
I'm assuming this is like grown-up Spider-Man, not teenage Spider-Man, right?
Yes, Peter Parker, not Miles Morales.
That sounds so good.
It does. So Jason Latour's run on Wolverine and the X-Men is going to have been a short one, as will have been Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2. It's been up there, it's been up, it's been down. I think this is a good way to end it if you're going to end it.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the stronger issues, and if you're going to get one tie-in book for The Death of Wolverine, go for this one. Now, normally we save our picks of the week for after we've reviewed everything, but as it happens, based on the way we're grouping everything, they naturally fall at the end because they're the two issues that don't actually tie directly into Axis or the death of Wolverine.
Who'da thunk it? So, we have from the first week, X-Force number 10, which is by Simon Spurrier and Tan Eng Huat. Now, Simon Spurrier, he's very much an acquired taste. We've mentioned that before. You either love him or you hate him. We love him. We very much drank the Kool-Aid. And this book, I think, will be an example of that for you. If you love Cy Spurrier, you'll love the book. If not, you won't.
Now, this is a standalone issue, and it brings back a character who was first introduced in X-Men Legacy number 300, Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not is a brilliant retcon. He's a character who basically exists to be a retcon. He's laced back through the X-Men's entire history, but you've never seen him because his mutant power is that no one remembers he exists, including electronics, including monitoring devices, unless he's directly interacting with them.
What a great freaking premise. It's like the silence out of Doctor Who. Now, he's also just sort of a regular kind of schlubby dude who happens to be hiding in X-Force's base, and because of that, we see through his eyes. So it's easy to forget in a Marvel universe where, like, Deadpool is comic relief, even though he kills a lot of people, that some of these characters are dangerously psychotic.
Yeah, X-Force objectively should be terrifying. I mean, these are not people who should be carrying heavy weaponry, or any weaponry, or possibly being outside and interacting with the world. And adding Forget-Me-Not into that mix really drives that home.
Yeah, and so because of that, we have a lot of very dark humor in the issue, as Forget-Me-Not is just freaking out because these, like, scary people are chasing him, and also a lot of kind of shocking violence and tragedy. It manages to really skirt that line between funny and, like, uncomfortable, right up until the last page. It's a very good issue. I highly recommend it.
Now, our pick for this week once again falls outside of the two big crossovers. And this is Uncanny X-Men number 27. It's written by Brian Bendis, drawn by Chris Bacallo, colored by Jose Villarrubia and Rin Barreto, and sports one of the best covers in recent memory.
Seriously, look at that thing. I freaking love it. It's poetry.
Yeah, I want a blown-up, big poster-sized print of this to put on the wall. And it's worth noting that in a world with tons of X titles and two major crossover events going on, chronology is not really lining up effectively right now. There are 3 stories taking place simultaneously. There are a lot of the same characters in all 3 of them. I'm not sure quite how that's supposed to play out.
Yeah, I really miss back in the 80s where if a character was in one place, then they would not be in a different book at the same time. So, like, if Wolverine was in Japan, then he wouldn't be there with the X-Men. That was very nice of Marvel. That was very considerate. I miss that.
That said, of the big plot lines that are going on right now, this is the one I find most interesting. This spins directly out of the last Will and Testament of Charles Xavier, and it focuses on a mutant named Matthew Malloy, who is nearly omnipotent, and whose powers Xavier has essentially just been completely blocking periodically for almost all of Matthew's life, but who, with Xavier dead, is now manifesting violently, and S.H.I.E.L.D's trying to respond to it, the X-Men are trying to respond to it, and this issue itself doesn't have a lot going on, but where it's obviously leading looks fascinating.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on sort of a new status quo for the X-Men, which may actually not be coming so much out of a big event, but out of normal stories that are not part of a big crossover, which is really refreshing. I'm curious to see where it goes.
And our panel of the week of October 8th is from X-Force number 10. It's the last panel of the issue, and I can't actually tell you why I love it because it's a major, major spoiler, but trust, it's brilliant.
We already told you should read the issue. Now we're telling you should read the issue, and make sure you also read the last panel, which you probably already would have done. But just in case, we're specifying.
Really the whole last page, but especially that last panel. Man, chills.
So our panel of the week for this week is actually from the new Wolverine and the X-Men, and it's during one of the many people reminiscing about Wolverine. In this case, it's Iceman. I'm just saying, Wolverine drunk and doing karaoke is like my favorite thing in the world, especially with the really stylized art we have in this segment of the book. It's really hard to get comedy right in a book that's not traditionally comedy. This time, it's beautiful. I laughed out loud while I was reading this on my lunch break.
Yeah,
great.
Likewise, in an airport. A little bit awkward. Okay, So we just reviewed 10 books. Wolverine is definitely finally dead. And yeah, I think we're out.
Please check out our podcast, Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. You can find that at rachelandmiles.com, on iTunes, and on Stitcher. We have new episodes up every single Sunday.
Along with visual companions. And this Sunday, that episode is our New York Comic Con special, where we sat down with artists Chris Anka and Russell Dodderman, and a whole lot of wine, to talk about X-books, drawing, what it means to come onto an X-book as a fan, and possibly a little bit of Adam X the Extreme.
Adam X the Extreme, yes! It's so good, guys. So, these video reviews are made possible by our Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much, as always. If you like these reviews, or our podcast, or just us, I guess, please consider becoming a supporter if you're not one already. You can find a link to our Patreon campaign from our website, rachelandmiles.com.
And we'll see you next week, when Wolverine will, presumably, still be dead. Man, I have a lot of event fatigue, so I feel like I'm not objective on this, but do you think we're being too hard on the death of Wolverine?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm mainly just disappointed that you didn't get to kill him like we were saying you would on the podcast.
I know, right? That was my favorite fake San Diego announcement.
Well,
man.
There's always next time, Rachel. There's always next time.